considered that the most controversial, maybe the most culturally significant, and definitely the most misunderstood object in your daily life is sitting right now, quietly, inside your refrigerator.
It's wild to think about, really.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are cracking open the truth about a dietary staple that has been, well, revered as a symbol of the cosmos, completely demonized as a public health hazard, and commodified to just an unimaginable scale. We are talking about the egg.
And this specific deep dive is tailored directly for you.
Exactly. For the rational man who questions the status quo. If you're someone who isn't afraid to look past mainstream narratives, who wants to understand the literal, unfiltered foundation of our diets and our traditions without the corporate marketing spin, you are in the exact right place today.
Because looking at an egg and merely seeing breakfast is really a modern luxury. I mean, beneath that fragile exterior is a staggering history of biological engineering, some incredibly intense nutritional debates that span decades, and quite frankly, some surprisingly dark realities regarding modern industrialization.
Yeah, to get to the bottom of all this, our source material today is a truly incisive, really fascinating new ebook. It's titled Eggs Unscrambled, a comprehensive guide to understanding, using, and enjoying eggs. And it's by Conrad Riker.
Right, and Riker specifically designed this text as an edutainment journey for men who are ready to dig deep into the science, the history, and the unvarnished reality of the food they consume daily. It's not a light read, it's rigorous.
It really is. Now, before we start pulling apart the layers of this topic, I want to remind you, the listener, to like and subscribe to the show right now so you never miss these deep dives. Furthermore, we highly encourage you to open up Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now.
Right now.
Yeah, go buy Eggs Unscrambled so you can follow along with the specific historical charts and the nutritional breakdowns we'll be referencing today. And while you have your phone out, make sure to follow the author on Substack at Conrad and Riker. You are definitely not going to want to miss his ongoing insights.
Setting the stage for where we are heading today involves untangling a massive web. We're going to explore the astonishing evolutionary history of this biological vessel, systematically debunk the massive nutritional myths that clouded public judgment for nearly half a century, and analyze the profound psychological impact the egg has had on human civilization.
And then we go into the modern era.
Right. Finally, we are going to pull back the curtain on the highly deceptive practices of the modern poultry industry.
So let's start with the timeline, because the sheer scale of the egg's history it's difficult to wrap your mind around. We are talking about an object that predates human existence by hundreds of millions of years.
Millions.
Yeah, the author points out that early egg-laying species, specifically ancient reptiles, were utilizing eggs as a primary survival strategy long before the hard shell even entered the evolutionary picture.
Yes.
So how did a soft, vulnerable membrane transform into the armored shell we recognize today?
Well, the transition from a soft, leathery membrane to a calcified fortress is a pure story of environmental adaptation. Those early soft-shelled eggs were essentially tethered to wet or incredibly moist environments.
Because they would dry out.
Exactly. If a reptile laid a soft egg in the dry sun, it would desiccate. The moisture would just evaporate, and the embryo would die almost immediately.
Wow.
So the evolutionary leap, the true biological game changer, was the development of the thick, hard calcium carbonate shell. And this adaptation was driven primarily by the ancestors of modern birds.
Okay, why birds specifically?
Because as these creatures evolved the capability of flight, they required a lightweight yet incredibly sturdy vessel to protect their embryos from the harsh, high-altitude, often freezing environments where they were nesting to avoid ground predators.
That makes sense. Nature essentially developed a localized biological armor for them.
That's a great way to put it.
But armor implies a solid wall, whereas the text highlights a paradox about the shell itself. It's solid enough to withstand the weight of an incubating parent, yet the book says it's porous. The idea of a breathing rock seems biologically impossible.
It does seem counterintuitive, but under a microscope, the surface of an eggshell resembles a lunar landscape. It is riddled with thousands of microscopic craters.
And those are the pores.
Right, and those pores are absolutely vital. An embryo is a living, developing organism that requires constant oxygen and produces carbon dioxide. The calcium carbonate matrix is structured specifically to allow for continuous gas exchange.
So it's exchanging gases through the shell.
Exactly. The developing bird is literally breathing through the stone-like exterior while the pores remain small enough to prevent lethal bacteria from easily invading the sterile environment inside.
It's an incredible filtration system. And inside that sterile environment, you have the albumin, which we call the egg white, and the yolk. Let's talk about the mechanics of those two components, starting with the white, because it isn't just filler space, right?
Not at all. The albumin is a highly specialized water-soluble protein matrix. Its primary function is actually mechanical defense.
Defense against what?
Physical trauma. It acts as a sophisticated shock absorber. If a nest is jostled in a high wind, or a parent lands too forcefully on the eggs, the albumin cushions the delicate embryonic life suspended in the center.
I see.
Furthermore, it traps essential air and moisture, maintaining the exact hydrostatic pressure needed for the embryo's development.
Which leaves the yolk, described in the text as an evolutionary energy surge. It's basically a biological power pack.
It is the literal lifeblood. The yolk is an incredibly dense concentration of fat, vitamins, and minerals. Think about it from a biological perspective. When a hatchling finally breaks through that calcium shell, which is an act that requires a massive expenditure of caloric energy, it doesn't have time to forage.
Right. It's exhausted.
Exactly. It is immediately thrust into a brutal struggle for survival. The yolk provides the immediate, intense caloric density required to survive those crucial first few days outside the shell.
Visualizing this structure changes the entire context of making a morning omelet. You are holding a perfectly engineered, self-contained life support system that required millions of years of brutal trial and error to optimize.
And that concept of biological optimization leads directly into the nutritional reality of the food. A structure optimized to create and sustain complex life is inherently optimized to fuel the human body.
For the listener focused on optimizing physical performance, the macronutrient breakdown is incredibly efficient. A single standard-size egg contains roughly 6 grams of high-quality protein and 5 grams of healthy fats.
Yeah.
But the text makes a crucial distinction about the type of protein we are dealing with here. It uses the term complete protein. Can you break that down?
Absolutely. The human body requires 20 different amino acids to function properly, to build muscle, to synthesize hormones, all of that. Our bodies can manufacture 11 of them internally. The remaining 9 are classified as essential amino acids, meaning we must acquire them through our diet. A complete protein is a food source that contains all 9 of these essential amino acids in roughly the correct proportions.
So it's basically the perfect building block.
Exactly. When you subject your body to intense physical stress, such as heavy resistance training, you are creating micro tears in your muscle fibers. The complete amino acid profile of an egg supplies the exact biological building blocks needed for rapid, efficient muscle repair and hypertrophy.
Beyond the muscular system, the micronutrient density is just staggering. We're looking at a profile containing vitamins A, D, E, K, and a whole suite of B complex vitamins, including B2, B5, B7, and B12.
It's a powerhouse.
Yeah, yet among this alphabet soup of vitamins, the author zeroes in on one specific nutrient that seems chronically ignored by mainstream dietary advice, and that is choline.
Choline is a fascinating compound. It's absolutely crucial for structural integrity in cell membranes, synthesizing DNA, and supporting optimal liver function.
But it goes beyond just the liver.
Right. More importantly, for anyone interested in cognitive optimization, choline is a precursor to acetylcholine, which is an essential neurotransmitter involved in memory, mood, and muscle control.
And you can get that from just eating eggs.
Yes. A single large egg provides approximately 25% of your daily required choline. Ignoring this nutrient profile is a significant misstep for anyone trying to keep their neurological pathways firing at peak efficiency.
So here's the massive contradiction that the book tackles head on. We have this nutrient-dense, perfectly packaged superfood, yet starting around the 1960s, prominent health institutions and mainstream media narratives began telling the public that eggs were the dietary devil.
They really did.
They were heavily villainized as the primary culprit behind the surge in heart attacks. How did the entire global medical establishment arrive at such a flawed conclusion?
The error stemmed from a fundamental failure to communicate nuanced biochemistry to the general public, and this was compounded by overly simplistic epidemiological studies.
What were they looking at exactly?
Early researchers identified that high levels of cholesterol in the bloodstream were linked to arterial plaque and heart disease. They then looked at the egg, noted it contained high levels of dietary cholesterol, and drew a straight causal line between the two.
They just assumed one equaled the other.
Exactly. They operated on the assumption that eating cholesterol directly raised your blood cholesterol.
It sounds logical on the surface, but human metabolism isn't a simple input-output machine.
Not at all. The liver tightly regulates the amount of cholesterol in your blood. If you consume more dietary cholesterol, your liver simply produces less of it internally to maintain a baseline balance.
So it regulates itself.
Yes. The book cites a highly significant 2018 study published in the British Medical Journal, which analyzed data from hundreds of thousands of individuals over decades. The conclusion was definitive. Moderate egg consumption, meaning up to one a day, does not raise the risk of cardiovascular disease for the vast majority of healthy people.
The real danger to public health wasn't the egg itself, but rather the company it kept on the breakfast plate. Think about the typical American diner breakfast. It pairs the egg with massive portions of highly processed, saturated fat-laden meats like bacon and sausage, alongside heavily buttered, simple carbohydrate toast.
Precisely.
The mainstream narrative unjustly vilified a natural, complete protein source while ignoring the broader context of the meal. It's a textbook case of correlation being mistaken for causation, amplified by institutional inertia.
And the consequence of that bad science was the promotion of highly processed, sugar-heavy breakfast cereals and margarines. They pushed those as heart-healthy alternatives, which arguably contributed significantly to the modern metabolic health crisis.
It really underscores the necessity of interrogating accepted dietary wisdom rather than blindly following food pyramids designed by committees. Now, understanding the true nutritional value requires us to also understand the science of how we prepare them. The author refers to the egg as the Swiss Army knife of the kitchen, implying that without it, the entire culinary world fundamentally collapses. Cakes turn into dense bricks, burgers refuse to bind on the grill, and classic sauces lose their entire structural integrity.
The chemistry driving that versatility relies on the concept of protein denaturation and coagulation.
Break that down for us.
Think of the proteins inside a raw egg, like tightly wound, microscopic balls of yarn suspended in water. When you introduce thermal energy heat from a skillet or an oven, those weak chemical bonds holding the yarn together begin to break.
Okay, so they unravel.
Exactly. The proteins denature, meaning they rapidly unspool and stretch out. As they crash into one another in this unspooled state, they form new, stronger bonds, creating an extensive three-dimensional web.
And that's coagulation.
Yes, this coagulation is what traps water and transforms the egg from a runny liquid into a firm, solid structure.
Another chemical process mentioned in the text is the Maillard reaction. We usually associate that with searing a steak, but it applies to eggs as well, specifically when baking or frying at high temperature.
Right, the Maillard reaction is the complex chemical interaction between amino acids and reducing sugars under high heat. While eggs don't have high sugar content, they have enough to trigger this reaction when they hit a hot buttered pan.
That's what gives it that flavor.
Exactly. This process generates hundreds of new, highly complex flavor compounds, creating those deep, savory brown edges that humans are biologically wired to crave.
Now, there is a persistent piece of pop culture fitness lore, popularized by movies like Rocky, that drinking raw eggs is the ultimate, most efficient way to absorb their power. But the text completely dismantles this idea, pointing out that cooking an egg fundamentally alters its bioavailability.
Yeah, that movie myth is actually terrible advice. Consuming raw eggs is highly inefficient from a nutritional standpoint. The human digestive tract only absorbs about 50% of the protein in a raw egg.
Only 50%.
Right. When you apply heat and denature those proteins, you're essentially pre-digesting them. The coagulation process makes the protein structures significantly easier for digestive enzymes to break down, increasing protein absorption to roughly 91%.
That is a massive difference.
It is. Furthermore, cooking enhances the bioavailability of certain B vitamins and vitamin D, making them easier for the intestinal wall to absorb.
It is a trade-off, however. The text points out that prolonged exposure to high heat can degrade certain heat-sensitive antioxidants and reduce the total yield of vitamin C, though eggs are not a primary source of vitamin C to begin with.
Sure.
The practical takeaway for you, the listener, is that your choice of preparation is a deliberate nutritional decision. Whether you poach it gently to preserve the yolk's delicate fats, hard-boil it for portable protein, or whip the whites into a mechanical foam for a meringue, you are performing localized alchemy.
And the concept of transformation and alchemy bridges perfectly into the psychological and cultural history of the egg. Long before humans understood amino acids or denaturing proteins, they recognized the egg as an object of profound mystery.
On a purely psychological level, the smell of frying eggs is a powerful trigger for nostalgia. It is deeply embedded in our collective memory as the ultimate comfort food. Yet the historical record shows that this mundane object inspired intense awe and, in many cases, legitimate fear.
Superstitions surrounding eggs are found in nearly every culture on Earth. The text details a widespread European belief that accidentally dropping and breaking an egg was a dire omen.
What did they think it meant?
They saw it as a harbinger predicting a violent incoming storm or even a sudden death in the community. And in West Africa, folklore dictated that consuming an egg laid by a stolen hen would invite a curse of terrible luck upon the thief's entire bloodline.
The fragility of the shell seemed to represent the fragility of fate itself, but its primary symbolic weight always returned to the concept of fertility and the genesis of life. The ancient rituals designed to harness this power are astonishing.
Taking a historical tour reveals the egg as a universal talisman. In ancient Greece, philosophers and commoners alike viewed the egg as a microcosm of the entire universe.
A microcosm, how so?
Well, the round protective shell represented the earth, the clear albumen represented the atmosphere or the heavens, and the golden yolk symbolized the life-giving sun.
That's beautiful imagery.
It was. Consequently, they would place intact eggs upon the tombs of deceased loved ones to symbolize the enduring cycle of the cosmos and the hope of an afterlife.
And the Romans operationalized this symbolism into their agricultural practices. Before the planting season, Roman farmers would perform a ritual where they walked their barren fields carrying lit torches. They would deliberately toss raw eggs onto the soil, invoking the goddess Ceres. They genuinely believed the divine, latent life force imbued within the eggs would seep into the dirt and guarantee a bountiful harvest.
Moving forward to the Middle Ages in Ireland, the focus of the rituals shifts from agricultural yields to human reproduction. Rural communities practiced a chaotic tradition of pelting newlyweds with raw eggs as they left the church.
Sounds messy.
Very. The objective was to symbolically cover the couple in fertility, to ensure a fecund marriage and a large family. Additionally, Irish folklore held that an egg laid specifically on Good Friday possessed miraculous properties.
Like what?
It would supposedly never spoil, and consuming it later in the year would ward off serious illness.
It is entirely logical that an object carrying such heavy mythological baggage eventually infiltrated the most sacred spaces of all major world religions. The Christian Easter egg is the most globally recognized example, serving a dual purpose. It represents the stone tomb of Christ, with the hatching of the chick symbolizing the resurrection. Practically, it also marked the joyous end of Lent, a strict fasting period where animal products, including eggs, were historically forbidden.
Judaism utilizes the egg with similar thematic weight. On the Passover Seder plate, a roasted or braised egg, known as beitzah, is prominently displayed.
And what does it signify there?
It acts as a symbol of the continuous cycle of life and rebirth. But the scorching of the shell also serves as a somber symbol of mourning for the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem.
Fascinating.
In Hinduism, foundational texts describe the Hiranyagarbha, the golden cosmic egg floating in the primordial waters from which the creator god Brahma emerged to fracture the shell and form the universe. And in Chinese culture, the presentation of eggs boiled in red dye, red being the color of prosperity and good fortune, is a time-honored tradition during the new year and the birth of a child, wishing the recipient longevity.
So the egg has always functioned as a narrative device, communicating complex ideas about life, death, and time. This brings us to the utilization of the egg in pop culture, art, and literature. Storytellers have continuously leveraged this symbol to convey the most profound themes of the human experience.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez's magnum opus, 100 Years of Solitude, offers a brilliant literary example of this. In a pivotal scene, the character Remedios the Beauty physically ascends to heaven.
Right, she just floats up.
Yes, she is swept up in a sudden whirlwind of glowing white linen sheets. Literary analysts, and the text itself, suggest that this blinding white, gravity-defying whirlwind acts as a metaphorical representation of an egg. It signals her spiritual rebirth and represents the intangible, driving life force returning to the cosmos.
The visual arts rely on the egg just as heavily. Consider the Fabergé eggs commissioned by the Russian czars in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These were not mere trinkets. Crafted from solid gold, diamonds, and enamel, they were potent symbols of absolute, unquestioned imperial authority and unfathomable wealth.
They really were.
They served as literal canvases for historical storytelling, with miniature palaces or royal portraits hidden inside, showcasing the dominant power of the Romanov dynasty.
Contrasting that imperial permanence, you have the Surrealist movement, specifically Salvador Dali. In his iconic painting, The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory, Dali renders eggs in various stages of decomposition or fracture across a flooded landscape.
The melting clocks painting.
A variation of it, yes. He utilizes the inherent fragility of the shell to represent the haunting impermanence of human life and the inevitable degradation of the physical world.
Hollywood directors deeply understand this visual shorthand, too. The cinematic uses listed in the book demonstrate incredible range. In Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, the egg is frequently used as a chilling omen. When characters are seen preparing or eating eggs, it often precedes a violent betrayal or impending doom, completely subverting the comforting nature of the food.
And the science fiction horror masterpiece Alien executes the most terrifying subversion of this symbol. The film takes the universal, comforting symbol of fertility and twists it into a nightmarish threat.
Oh man, those scenes are intense.
They are. The massive, leathery eggs discovered in the derelict spacecraft do not hold the promise of innocent life. They act as weaponized vessels that unleash the facehugger, a monstrous parasite that violently forces its own reproductive cycle upon humanity.
On the completely opposite end of the emotional spectrum, animated films like Pixar's Finding Nemo use the egg to represent pure, unadulterated hope. After a devastating predator attack, the character Marlin finds a single, slightly damaged, surviving egg in his nest. That tiny sphere represents his entire remaining future, his resilience against the harsh ocean, and the visual manifestation of a father's unbroken love. The symbol is endlessly adaptable.
It is. But that adaptability in our culture stands in stark contrast to the rigid, highly engineered reality of how we actually produce them today. As consumers who value rational analysis and demand the truth, we must confront the darker realities of modern consumption and the industrial machine.
For the vast majority of human history, up until the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, eggs were a localized, unique resource. Families kept small flocks of hens in the backyard. The eggs harvested varied wildly in size, shape, shell thickness, and yolk flavor depending on the season and what the birds were foraging.
It was very natural.
Yeah, it was a natural, sustainable byproduct of humans living in close proximity to domesticated animals.
The catalyst for change was mass urbanization. As populations migrated from rural farms into dense concrete cities, the localized supply chain broke down and demand skyrocketed.
And it couldn't keep up.
Exactly. The modern poultry industry was rapidly birthed to solve this logistical nightmare, supercharged by the widespread implementation of the commercial incubator, which removed the need for the mother hen entirely. This transition moved the bird from the open backyard directly into the confines of the battery cage.
The reality of battery cage farming is a brutal mechanical process that the modern consumer is deliberately shielded from. The text describes an environment where millions of hens are stacked in wire cages, stacked multiple tiers high inside massive warehouses. The space allocation is staggering. Each individual bird is provided a living area smaller than a standard A4 sheet of printer paper.
It's incredibly bleak.
They are physically incapable of spreading their wings, nesting, or engaging in any natural flocking behaviors.
The environment is meticulously controlled, not for the comfort of the animal, but for maximum physiological extraction. These warehouses utilize constant artificial light and dark cycles
To mess with their biological clocks.
Yes. By manipulating the perceived length of the day, facility managers trick the hen's endocrine systems into remaining in a state of perpetual spring, forcing an unnatural, relentless rate of egg laying. It is an existence completely devoid of natural sunlight, fresh air, or solid ground.
It is the absolute commodification of a biological entity. And if you are a consumer trying to navigate the grocery store, attempting to make an informed, ethical, or even just a higher quality nutritional choice, you are immediately assaulted by a wall of highly deceptive marketing terminology.
The labeling system engineered by the industry is largely designed to placate consumer conscience without forcing fundamental changes to the profitable industrial model.
Like the cage-free label.
Exactly. When a carton is prominently labeled cage-free, the idyllic pastoral image that springs to the consumer's mind is a flock of chickens happily pecking in a sunlit pasture. The grim reality, in the majority of massive commercial operations, is simply that the birds have been removed from the small wire cages and instead packed by the tens of thousands into massive, windowless, heavily ventilated barns.
So they are still trapped.
Completely. They are entirely confined indoors, standing shoulder to shoulder on floors covered in their own waste.
The term free range is equally manipulative. The book points out the massive loopholes in agricultural law. Legally, a facility might earn the free range label by merely providing the thousands of birds inside a barn with a single small door that leads to a tiny concrete or dirt porch.
Yes, it's a technicality.
The access might only be granted for a few minutes a day, and the sheer density of the flock means the vast majority of the birds will never even see the door, let alone step outside. It is an elaborate illusion of choice, meticulously marketed to make the consumer feel superior about participating in a deeply flawed system.
Beyond the stark realities of animal welfare, any rational analysis of this system must account for its massive environmental footprint. Sustaining millions of densely packed birds requires an unfathomable amount of caloric input. Massive tracts of vital ecosystems, particularly in South America, are subjected to aggressive deforestation to grow the soy and corn necessary for commercial chicken feed.
And the water usage is crazy, too.
Right. These high-density operations require severe water usage for sanitation and cooling. The localized, concentrated waste produced by these farms frequently overwhelms local treatment capabilities, leading to severe nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in local waterways, creating massive dead zones. Add to this the complex logistics of refrigerated transportation, and the entire supply chain becomes a considerable driver of global greenhouse gas emissions.
We have engineered a hyper-efficient industrial machine that is clearly taking a heavy toll on the planet's ecosystems. But the text explores an even more insidious possibility. This heavily altered environment might be taking a toll on our own biology in ways we never anticipated.
The allergies.
Yes, this leads us to the enigma of rising allergies. It feels like egg allergies, particularly in children, were a rare anomaly a generation or two ago, yet today they are a prevalent, serious public health concern.
Biologically, an egg allergy is a severe miscalculation by the human immune system. Instead of recognizing the proteins found in the egg, specifically ovalbumin and ovotransferrin, as harmless, highly efficient nutrients, the immune system flags them as dangerous invading pathogens.
So it attacks them.
Yes, it mounts a massive, sometimes life-threatening inflammatory response to attack them. Determining exactly why the frequency of this biological miscalculation is increasing brings us to a concept detailed in the text known as the hygiene hypothesis.
The core premise of the hygiene hypothesis is fascinating and completely counterintuitive. It essentially argues that our modern industrialized world is entirely too clean.
Precisely. For the vast majority of human evolution, infants and children were exposed to a massive diversity of microbes, bacteria, and natural pathogens in their environment. This constant exposure acted as a training ground for the developing immune system.
Teaching it what to fight.
Exactly. Teaching it to differentiate between a truly dangerous virus and a harmless dietary protein. In our modern era, we raise children in heavily sanitized environments, scrub with antibacterial soaps, while feeding them diets dominated by highly processed, sterile foods lacking in microbial diversity.
So the immune system gets bored.
Essentially, yes. The hypothesis suggests that an understimulated, poorly trained immune system becomes hyperreactive. Deprived of its traditional microbial enemies, it begins attacking natural, harmless proteins like those perfectly packaged inside an egg.
We are potentially engineering our own biological aversions through our pursuit of a sanitized existence, and our attempts to engineer nature do not stop at hand sanitizer. The text highlights a watershed moment in agricultural technology that occurred in the year 2002. A biotechnology company called Astogen successfully produced the very first genetically modified egg.
That was a huge deal.
They altered the DNA of the chicken to produce specific pharmaceuticals within the egg white itself.
That 2002 milestone fundamentally shifted the paradigm. It proved that human technological capability had reached a point where we could successfully alter nature's foundational design at the genetic level, turning a food source into a bioreactor.
A bioreactor.
Yes. This opened the floodgates for how we conceptualize the future of food production, especially as we search for solutions to the massive environmental and ethical problems created by the industrial battery cage system.
One of the major innovations currently gaining traction is the implementation of urban vertical farming. Rather than relying on massive, polluting supply chains that ship eggs thousands of miles, companies are utilizing vertical space inside abandoned warehouses within concrete jungles.
It's very smart logistics.
They're raising localized flocks and growing food directly within city limits using controlled, hydroponic, and highly monitored environments. This is a direct technological combat maneuver against the issue of urban food deserts.
Right. Those are sprawling urban areas where populations have zero access to fresh whole foods and are forced to rely on processed convenience store calories.
But the tech and food industries are also looking entirely past the chicken itself.
We are currently witnessing the rapid horizon of plant-based egg alternatives. They are utilizing isolated proteins from mung beans or soy to mimic the coagulation and culinary properties of a beaten egg.
And the lab grown stuff, too.
Exactly. Billions of dollars are being poured into the development of lab-grown cultivated eggs. This utilizes cellular agriculture to grow real egg proteins in a bioreactor without ever hatching a bird. This is the industry's ultimate response to the pressures we've discussed. It's an attempt to recreate the exact biochemical makeup of the egg while completely removing the animal and the associated environmental footprint from the equation.
Which is an undeniable feat of modern scientific capability. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, tracing the incredible multi-layered journey of the egg. We started hundreds of millions of years in the prehistoric past, analyzing how a soft membrane evolved into an armored, breathable shell to protect fragile life in the harshest environments on Earth.
It's been quite the journey.
We navigated the treacherous waters of 1960s dietary misinformation, watching the egg become a victim of flawed science, only to be entirely vindicated by modern medical data as a crucial, micronutrient-dense powerhouse essential for human optimization.
We observed how this simple object served as an imperial canvas for the Russian czars, a haunting symbol of impermanence for Salvador Dali, and a sacred object of reverence in rituals spanning from the fields of ancient Rome to the modern Passover Seder.
And we unflinchingly confronted the grim mechanical reality of how this biological marvel was reduced to an automated output in a windowless battery cage, prompting a desperate technological race to out-innovate the damage we've caused. Understanding the deep history, the complex biology, and the deceptive industrial machinery behind these everyday objects is the absolute key to being a truly informed, conscious participant in the modern world. You cannot fix a broken agricultural system, nor can you make the optimal, rational choices for your own physical health if you do not thoroughly understand the unfiltered foundation of what you are consuming.
True knowledge is the only effective weapon against marketing spin, outdated institutional myths, and the illusion of choice presented in the supermarket aisle.
If you found value in this deep dive, if you feel like you are walking away armed with better data and equipped to understand the invisible systems operating around you, make sure to like and subscribe to the show right now. We highly recommend you go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and purchase the phenomenal ebook we reviewed today, Eggs Unscrambled by Conrad Reicher.
The book goes into even greater granular detail on the specific scientific studies and historical records we touched upon today.
And do not forget to follow the author on Substack at Conrad N. Reicher for a continuous stream of unvarnished truths and rigorous analysis of the topics that actually matter.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, broader thought to mull over. We have analyzed how human technology is currently racing to replicate the egg in sterile laboratories, or through highly processed plant-based alternatives, in a desperate bid to solve the massive ethical and environmental crises caused by our own industrial farming models. But consider the arrogance of that endeavor. If it took nature hundreds of millions of years of brutal, unforgiving evolution to perfect the exact nutritional, structural, and biological masterpiece of the egg, what are the hidden long-term consequences of humanity, assuming we can simply out-engineer nature's perfect design in a single generation?